Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing very well, and today we are going to be talking about No Guns Life Episode 3, Puppet. But before we get into that, I do want to give a big thank you to my boy @NachoGashardo over on Twitter for sharing last week's video, and if you too would like to have your name shouted out in next week's No Guns Life video, then be sure to share this video around on the internet and then tag me @JoJo Talks Too Much over on Twitter, and I will be sure to shout your name out in next week's video. So I gotta say, this episode does start on a sort of quote-unquote cute note for the show, as it starts off with JoJo basically like pouring himself a cup of coffee, and they have this nice little moment where they're reassuring Tetsuro that everything's gonna be okay. I keep wanting to call him Tetsuo like Akira, but it's Tetsuro. Anyway, there's this nice little scene of JoJo making himself a cup of coffee while Mary takes care of Tetsuro, and she's like feeding him because he's still trying to get used to his functioning arms. And she's like, oh, does like a cute girl feeding you like make you embarrassed? Oh, that's adorable. And JoJo like thwacks her with the plate because he's like, don't tease him. He's still trying to get used to his arms. And she's like, that hurt, you jerk. And Tetsuro is trying to get used to the fact that there's now two people in his life who actually care about him, because he's very much not used to that concept, as he's basically been experimented on for as long as he can seem to remember. From what I gather, he's not even sure whether or not he's actually the CEO's son. He may be suffering from some kind of amnesia. I don't super know, because honestly it's not really explained much. It seems as though he basically just has memories of being tortured and was desperate to see the outside world, like we've come to know from Tetsuro during the course of the show. However, I do have a concern, and my concern being that Tetsuro, well, he doesn't really hold up as a character as well as I was kind of hoping he would. Basically, the episode can be easily split into two parts. There's the like talkie blah 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 start of the episode, where there's a whole lot of discussion, but it's good discussion. And then it's followed by the more sort of like the next adventure that they go on, essentially. And it involves more of the kids from Burugen, or whatever the heck the baddie organization is called in this show. And the latter half suffers, and I think it's because at first I thought it was the lack of JoJo, but I could easily see Mary going through that same situation, and it would still be entertaining. So it sort of leaves me to assume that the reason why it doesn't quite work is Tetsuro just doesn't really hold up as a character. So when he's in the body of JoJo in the latter half of the episode, it just doesn't. It wasn't as fun, because Juzo's a much more fun character. Tetsuro is tragic, yes, but when an episode focuses on him, because that's what this episode does, it's a Tetsuro-focused episode, I found my attention kind of waning. Now I'm notoriously kind of like easy to hold attention with. Like when I was a kid, if you gave me a toy, I would be occupied for several hours. So to make me lose attention with an anime, that's kind of a feat. And with Tetsuro, in the body of JoJo, I just sort of lost interest, because I've seen tragic characters a billion times before and done significantly better than I feel it's done here. Tetsuro is a tragic character. You want to see good things happen to the kid, but when he's on his own, it's sort of like you've just sort of seen it before, and he doesn't really come off as all that tragic in this week's episode. Like he's been tragic in previous episodes, in the past two episodes, but in episode 3, his tone of voice coming through JoJo is much more like upbeat than you would assume it would be, given his whole character background. You would think he would sound a little bit more world weary, you know, like more tired, more just hurt and distant. But he sounds sort of like, he almost sounds like Deku from My Hero, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just it feels strange coming from this character who is meant to be tragic. And I just didn't get that. I didn't get that in the second half of the episode. And it doesn't help that the antagonist that I wrote down, Tetsuro JoJo. So Tetsuro JoJo, Tetsuro'S, as I will call their fusion. Tetsuro'S going up against, what are their names here that I've written down? Endy and Anne. Endy and Anne are very boring. They are revealed to be the big bads that the Kyusei group requests Juzo go take down. Although they think it's this like Splinter Cell terrorist organization who doesn't like extendeds. Like that's who the Kyusei group think it is, and the Kyusei group are basically like the local gang, from what I can gather. And they seem to be under the assumption that the kids who are being targeted in their local area, because basically what's been happening is that these kids are being attacked and having their extended, like their arms and their legs, like their cybernetic enhancements, like torn off and then hung up in the city square, which is like really messed up. And so they're assuming that it's this Splinter Cell organization who is known for being prejudiced against extendeds. They don't like extendeds, and they're sort of like this terrorist political group. And they assume it's them, but it's a total red herring. And it turns out to be Endy and Anne from Burugen, which the baddies, which Juzo immediately detects. He's like, no, it's definitely not. It's definitely not them. They wouldn't use extended powers to take out extendeds. That's against their code. It's definitely Burugen. They're trying to make a point by attacking kids until Tetsuro comes out of hiding. And it's a good plan, but what I don't like about it is that Anne and Endy are real boring. Like when they're introduced, Tetsuro like saves them from this dude from the Kyusei group, and they just sort of are like, okay, we have to eliminate the enemies. Yes, you're right. Let us eliminate the enemy. Sorry, we can't have witnesses. And I'm like, are they the kids from The Shining? Because that's what I thought they were for a second, just the way that they spoke. And it doesn't really go anywhere. Like Endy, at least, or End, or whatever you want to call her, she at least has like some of that Tetsuro pathos where she's clearly being tortured by her own extended abilities. It seems as though it's genuinely hurting her to even function. So at least she kind of has that going for her. It does lead to this like pretty, I don't want to say like emotional, but like a resonant scene where she sort of breaks through the wall of this restaurant and she's screaming in pain, and she's like, she's desperately searching for Anne, who Anne had told her earlier in the episode to like hold my hand and don't let go. And so she's reaching for a hand that's not there, and then Anne shows up and like grabs Anne's weird sort of like cyber spider arm type thing, and kind of calms her down. And that scene is done really well. Like I'll give the seiyus that like they really sell that scene, and the direction in that scene is good, but I just, for whatever reason, I just wasn't feeling it. And I'm not a big fan of the way that they show End's, like the way that she spiders up and spiders down, because it feels more like a magic thing than a sci-fi thing, because it's just like this big beam of light with like these like little yellow sparks flying off, and then she just kind of morphs back. You don't even see her morph back. She just like appears back to being a normal kid from that weird spider form thing that she was in. And it's a little weird. Like I said, it feels more like a magic, like a sorcery type thing than it does feel like a sci-fi thing. Because if it was a sci-fi thing, we would have seen like the spider arms like pop out, and like you could have made that horrifying. Like you could have made like the spider arms like break out of her back or something like that. It would have been gross, but you could have made it like intense. Whereas here it just seemed like a magical girl power up, only it was like creepy because it was a spider, I guess. It's I mean at the very least the episode ends on a cool note with Tetsuro, or Tetsuro'S, I suppose, showing up and saving End and Anne again, despite the fact that they tried to kill him. And it's weird because like he shows up and he's still in the body of Tetsuro, or Juzo, and Tetsuro is clearly like a kid's voice, but nobody around seemed to put two and two together that it's Tetsuro. You know, even though they all know that Tetsuro has the ability of harmony and can jump into other extendeds. So it to me, I was like, the second half of this episode really is cheap. But that's not to say that the first half is bad, because I actually thought like the more talkative scenes were actually handled really well. Like Juzo having that tense talk with the main dude from the Kyusei group actually had me intrigued. That little like standoff where even the guy from the Kyusei group tries to say like it's really hard to stare somebody down when you don't know where his eyes are, and Juzo's comeback is like, yeah, I've been getting that a lot lately. And it was a good scene. I thought that they handled the tension between Juzo and the big boss really, really well. I thought that whole, especially when when they're having the stare down, Juzo just kind of like sips his coffee to be like, I'm really not intimidated. Like, yes, you're bigger than me, but I am friggin' JoJo, okay? I have a gun for a face, so you don't really scare me all that much. But it was fun, and they had that little, like the Kyusei group's, the boss's, like, sidekick, sort of being like, you're messing with the boss? And just, like, the boss kept being like, shut up. But, like, that character was fun. I thought the whole discussion, like, the tense talk between them of them trying to recruit JoJo to help them take out whoever is taking out these kids, it both paints them as, like, they're still villainous, because they're, like, you know, they're a mob group, but at the same time, they're trying to protect kids in their neighborhood, so it's like, okay, like, they're recruiting him to do something good, but they're still bad guy. Like, it was interesting, at least, and I bought that JoJo was sort of debating it, even though he knew that it wasn't who they thought that it was. So I thought that scene was handled pretty well. And Tetsuro requesting Juzo's help was also good. It further fleshes out that these two are gonna be connected to each other for the rest of the show, obviously. I mean, they're in the OP together, these three. But you can kind of tell that they're already sort of forming a unit between the three of them. Mary clearly cares about Tetsuro and wants this kid to be safe. Tetsuro just seems to be happy to have anybody who cares at all. Whereas Juzo is still sort of standoffish. As he said in the last 2 episodes, he doesn't really like kids. He doesn't really get along with kids too well. But there's something about Tetsuro that he wants to protect this kid. And he does say, like, listen, I'll protect you for as long as I can. But I don't protect strangers for free. And it's like, okay, so he's gonna have to give him some kind of fee, and I'm sure he's gonna waive it eventually. But I like that they're still at that stage of their relationship where, like, they're not best friends or anything, but Juzo does feel for the kid. He wants to protect him from the big bads, so he's gonna do whatever he can to make sure that the kid's safe. With that said, everybody, I'm gonna have to give this week's episode a rank of C. It's still okay. It's a decent episode. I don't feel like my time was wasted or anything, but my attention with No Gun's Life is sort of waning if Tetsuro is gonna continue to be the main focus. On that note, everybody, that just about wraps everything up. But before we go, as always, I want to give a big shout out to the good folks over on Patreon, namely those in the Earl Grey tier: Calvin Atkinson, Crowbar of Irony, Dominic, Urza, Ginkotaku, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Mirth Mouser, Omni Garamond, Cell, Shadow Creative, Sipco Games, Somastan, Steven, Tristan, and Verdon. Thank you all so much for your continued support over on Patreon, and hey, if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then by all means go ahead and check out that first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, see all the cool rewards you can get for as little as $1 a month, and get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. But on that note, everybody, that's going to be a video, so I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, you've probably been on the internet long enough to know what to do already, so I ain't going to tell you, but I will say that it is appreciated, and if you are feeling stressed out today, then you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.